What if I told you that the world of banking and finance was being transformed before our very eyes?
XRP token.
Would you believe me?
Some say Ripple could be the next Bitcoin. What do you think, Brad? Is that a compliment that Ripple could be the next Bitcoin?
Because it's happening.
Well, I would say revolutionizing international finance is not something that you would expect to happen overnight.
I mean, just to boil that down a little bit, it's faster, it's cheaper, and so why wouldn't someone use it?
It's not just about the banks. Fundamentally, kind of a different view of how the world may play out.
There's a belief that, you could transform the global payment system over time.
Bitcoin's influence. Okay, so to understand how XRP will come to transform the future of finance, we have to go back in time, all the way back to 2008, because that's when the still anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto published the now famous Bitcoin white paper. And the problem he wanted to solve was the middleman, or the third party, behind payments and transactions. Because in modern day payment systems, banks and payment processors act as the middlemen who record transactions on a ledger. They can charge fees, reverse transactions, and ultimately decide whether or not a payment will go through. So Bitcoin's goal was to remove these middlemen in order to allow two individuals to send money to each other without the need for any financial institutions to get involved. And the idea was genius. In 2009, the first Bitcoin block was mined, but there was also a problem: energy consumption. Because to mine a Bitcoin, computers, also called miners, compete with one another to solve a mathematical problem or a puzzle to prove that it has spent real energy or work in doing so. And this is a process known as proof of work. But this energy consumption comes at a real cost. As of now, Bitcoin currently has the annualized carbon footprint of the entire Czech Republic. So Bitcoin, as genius as the idea is, it isn't without its flaws. Enter XRP. So let's fast forward to 2011. Enter Jed McCaleb, Arthur Brito, and David Schwartz. All three were inspired by Bitcoin and thought the idea was brilliant, but they also saw its limitations for real-life use. It was too slow, transaction fees could skyrocket when the network was busy, it used crazy amounts of energy, and it wasn't built for banks or for everyday companies to use. So they wanted to take Bitcoin's core idea of digital money and tweak it to help solve a huge real-world problem. And that's the broken, expensive, slow system banks use to send money internationally. You see, banks have to keep huge piles of cash sitting in foreign correspondent accounts because of this old and slow cross-border payment system called SWIFT. Let me show you exactly what I mean. When money travels from one country to another, it bounces through multiple middlemen banks called correspondent banks. Now, none of these correspondents want the payment to fail, so they pre-fund their accounts with millions or billions in specific foreign currencies just in case. And that money mostly sits there earning almost nothing, not being lent out or invested. On top of that, the correspondent banks charge fees for holding the money and processing the transfers, fees which are then passed on to you. And globally, trillions of dollars are trapped this way. It's a necessary safety net that works, but it's incredibly inefficient, expensive, and wasteful. So the solution to this problem had to be faster than SWIFT, cheaper than SWIFT, and more energy efficient than Bitcoin, and that solution was XRP. So now, say someone wants to send money internationally from one bank to another, say from the US dollar to the Japanese yen. The dollar now gets converted into XRP. The XRP is sent across the XRP ledger in 3 to 5 seconds, and then it's converted instantly into the Japanese yen without any fees tacked on by middlemen banks. The whole thing costs a fraction of a penny, literally 0.00001 XRP. And that fee stays the same no matter how busy the network gets. Now compare that to Bitcoin, whose transaction fees increase significantly when the network gets busy. And on top of this much faster speed, the XRP ledger is able to support over 1,500 transactions per second sustainably. which is far superior to that of Bitcoin's sluggish 7 transactions per second and confirmation times that can drag on for 10 minutes or even longer during busy times. And to solve Bitcoin's energy problem, the XRP ledger pre-mined the entire 100 billion supply of XRP at launch. As a matter of fact, the XRP ledger itself uses energy comparable to that of running an email server. And thus, in 2012, our founders completed the XRP ledger code and the XRP ledger went live, initiating the beginning of what is to be a revolution in banking. From code to company. So the XRP ledger goes live in 2012. The tech exists, it works, but it's just code on a network. So who's going to turn this into something that banks and real companies will actually use? Well, a few months later, in September 2012, the founders set up a company called OpenCoin to do just that. They brought in Chris Larson, a guy who had already built and sold big fintech companies, as a CEO. And their vision was clear: to build real products around the ledger so that banks could stop wasting time and money on the SWIFT system. They quickly raised money from some heavy-hitting investors, names like Andreessen Horowitz and Google Ventures, to hire a team and start talking to banks. In 2013, they renamed the company Ripple Labs, and later on, just Ripple. And they started what became RippleNet, which is basically a network that lets banks plug into the XRP ledger for faster payments. And the first real test came pretty quickly, because by 2014 to 2015, big names like Santander started experimenting with it for real-time remittances, and American Express tested it too. They weren't just playing around. They saw that XRP could cut out the delays and the huge pre-funded accounts they hated dealing with. And this is when it started feeling real. The idea wasn't just a cool experiment anymore. It was turning into something banks and payment companies were willing to try, because it saved them time, money, and headaches. The revolution wasn't just a code. It was the company itself that got the ball rolling. The big challenge. So things were looking good. Banks were testing XRP, partnerships were popping up, and the idea was starting to catch on. But then in December 2020, everything hit a wall. The US Securities and Exchange Commission sued Ripple, and their claim was that XRP was an unregistered security. The lawsuit stated that Ripple raised billions by selling XRP without registering it like a stock, thereby breaking the law. And suddenly, its future looked shaky. The case dragged on for years, and XRP's price took a hit. Exchanges delisted it in the US, and many people thought that this could be the end, that XRP and Ripple would never recover from the legal pressure. The whole crypto community watched closely, because if XRP lost, it could hurt the entire industry. But Ripple fought back hard. They argued that XRP was a currency and not a security, and that the sales on public exchanges were just normal trading and not investment contracts. The battle went through courts, motions, and endless paperwork. But then in July 2023, the judge ruled in favor of Ripple on a key point: that the sales of XRP on public exchanges to regular people were not securities. And that was a massive win. The SEC still won on some institutional sales, and Ripple had to pay a $125 million fine. But the core of the case, that XRP itself wasn't a security in most cases, held up. And by August 2025, the SEC and Ripple dropped all appeals. The fight was over, and what happened next was that the doors opened wide. Momentum and mainstream breakthroughs. In November 2025, US spot XRP ETFs started launching, and with institutional money flowing in, banks and companies that had been watching from the sidelines now felt safe to step in. And this momentum is now building fast. Ripple has rolled out RLUSD, their own USD stablecoin on the XRP ledger, which is backed by real cash, government-issued treasury bills, and even bonds. RLUSD is growing fast, and banks are using it alongside XRP for even smoother transfers. On the tech side, the XRP ledger keeps getting upgrades. Real-world assets, or RWAs, things like tokenized US treasuries, commercial paper, and even real estate are piling up on the network, and both banks and big firms see it. What I'm trying to say is that this isn't just for payments anymore. This is a platform for the future of finance, and Asia is currently taking the lead. Japanese banks like SBI Holdings, they're pushing forward with RLUSD rollout plans for early 2026, and partnerships with Mizuho Bank and others are accelerating. But we haven't even talked about the future of money, which is digital currency, and XRP is positioned right in the middle because governments are racing to launch their own digital dollars and central bank digital currencies, also called CBDCs. Ripple already runs pilots in places like Bhutan and Palau, and XRP serves as that bridge that connects them all. And I believe that within the next 2 years, the US will either release or prepare to release the digital dollar, branded with American symbols, maybe something like a gold coin with a spaceship. And let's not forget that payment processors are changing too. Big names such as Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, they're about to get a new competitor. In August 2025, Gemini launched the XRP Edition credit card. This is a physical card issued by WebBank on the MasterCard network, offering up to 4% back in XRP on everyday spending. And just last month, in December 2025, Ripple got conditional approval to charter Ripple National Trust Bank, which is a federal trust bank focused on custody and settlement. It's not a full consumer bank, but it puts Ripple under direct federal oversight, strengthening the credibility of RLUSD and opening the door for even deeper integration within traditional finance. And these are the kind of regulatory wins that turn Ripple into serious financial infrastructure. So now, in early 2026, the picture is looking clear. XRP isn't just fighting for survival anymore, it's winning real adoption. ETFs are bringing in mainstream money, stablecoins make it practical for everyday use, tokenized assets are opening new doors, and the old problems like slow SWIFT transfers, idle trillions, and high fees are starting to look like history. The revolution that began in 2012 is no longer just a promise. It's happening. And it's happening now.